Welcome to Channel 24. It is a pleasure to welcome back to our studio former Lithuanian foreign minister and senior political leader, Gabrielius Landsbergis. Welcome to our studio again.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So, Russia goals have been unchanged, and the recent brutal attacks on Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities only confirm that. In this context, it's crucial to examine how Europe's leadership is evolving, both in terms of military and economic support for Ukraine. So, I cannot avoid a question to start from your recent article, which is blowing my mind and a lot of Ukrainians, where you said that you compared today's international politics to professional wrestling. And, that's a very interesting comparison. So are you suggesting that even the West's support for Ukraine risk becoming more about narrative than actual strategy?
Well, in a way, I argue that it has always resembled this. But even myself and so many people that work in the field are tempted to believe that this time this is real. And I think that, 3.5 years of Ukrainian struggle should force us actually to admit what is happening. And just very recent events, a couple of days ago, and, a new page was opened by President Donald Trump. 2 days later, again, we figure out that nothing really has changed. So I criticize this attention-grabbing way of making politics rather than really producing content and policies that would help Ukraine in the front.
Yes, but what is the cost of this, pseudo engagement for Ukraine, and who actually benefits from it?
Yeah, it's the cost is horrible. Clearly, Ukrainians are paying with their lives every single day. We're seeing, again, just this night, 400 drones have been used against Ukrainian cities. So this is the actual cost. The other side of the coin is that there's also a limited chance to understand what is actually happening in the West, because we're paying so much attention to these pseudo events, pseudo reality, that we actually forget about what is actually needed. Right. So, for example, now people are saying, OK, so we will see a huge number of, American support that will be paid by the European countries, and it will reach Ukraine, and Ukraine will be able to stabilize the situation. But, I suggest let's look into the facts and, really cut through it. So who is going to pay? Where is the line of the countries that are lining to buy American weapons? I've heard Germany going to purchase a couple of Patriot batteries. This is very important. But then who else? We heard Italy is not going to do that. France is not going to do that. And I'm worried that this again will be, one more very good headline with very little notice. So we need Western people to wake up and start putting pressure on their government so that they would actually do the real thing.
Yeah, but, at first I thought probably this time Europe will pay for, Donald Trump political decisions this time. And now you're saying that a lot of countries, big allies to Ukraine, are not willing to do that.
Yeah, okay, let's retain some hope, right? So there is a chance that things might start changing. I'm always saying that. But, my argument now here is that I will cheer and I will believe when I see the weapons that Europe has paid for and Americans have delivered, that they will be used against Russian targets in Russia, in Ukraine, wherever they are. When the rocket will be flying Moscow direction, Russia direction, this is where I will say, okay, fine, finally things are happening. Until that time, we've seen so many promises and actually very little progress.
Yeah, but we've seen countries like Germany, you mentioned, Finland, Denmark, they take real steps, they quietly, without this theater, taking steps, making decisions. But what does that tell us about the kind of leadership Ukraine truly needs from its partners?
Well, that's a very good example. When I see a German chancellor in Bundestag defending spending on Germany defense, on German defense, on Baltic defense, on Ukrainian defense, he's being criticized by the opposition, by whoever. I kind of feel sympathy for him, right? So because he's actually has skin in the game, he's paying a political price. He's not making very glamorous headlines, and he's trying to push through. So there's very little surprise when I hear that Germany is the first country, and until this moment, the only country which is going actually to purchase things from the United States and send them to Ukraine. You mentioned Finland and you mentioned Denmark. It's actually a very good examples as well, very close to where my country is. And leaders of those countries have been staunch supporters of Ukraine. Again, without major announcements, without major plans or tweets, they would just basically do the right thing. And yeah, so there is Ukraine has real friends. It has friends who are committed. But has a very strong enemy as well, in the form of Russia, which has allies like China who are, well, showing what allies should be doing on Ukraine front as well.
Yeah, but now I think why Germany is becoming like a real friend for Ukraine and others don't. No, I'm not saying most of them, but some of them that we were relying on.
Well, it's first of all, there is a political change that took place in Germany. I think it is important to notice that there is a difference in leadership style, in commitment when it comes to the previous government and current. The second argument probably is that, at least when talking with German politicians and think tankers, I have a feeling that a sense of responsibility and actually self-preservation has kicked in, meaning that German Baltic ports in the north of Germany are actually, people there are actually thinking about what would happen if Russia would invade Europe. They're really close. They would be defending, Lithuania. They would probably help defend. Poland. So for them, this is already rather different than it was before.
Do you think they will really defend Lithuania or Poland?
Well, that's it's always a question until it's tested.
Yes, absolutely. But I've just recently I've spoke with a British colonel where he said, "Listen, no one in NATO wants to sacrifice any soldier for any inch of Ukrainian land," and that was like boom for me. Like seriously, you have to wake up. So I know Ukraine is not in NATO, but we are talking right now about the countries in NATO, and he said still. I mean, no one wants to send their people to die.
Yeah, you're very right with this. I think that one of the fundamental mistakes that the West has done with Ukraine is still thinking about Ukraine as an isolated country that will probably either magically win with a very limited support, that we're giving, or somehow Putin will be, content with what he has. He will stop maybe by Zaporizhia, maybe, somewhere else, administrative borders, whatever. And he'll say, okay, it's fine. I paid enough for the war. But it's wrong. It's a complete false strategy because Ukraine is actually now defending every single other NATO country that has border or is close to Russia. So Ukraine is defending Lithuania, Poland, other Baltic states. And we do not accept that. I've always argued that Lithuania's strategic depth is just 300 kilometers. Basically, almost the same amount of territory that Ukraine is currently, temporarily lost by Russian occupation. So that means that for Russians to take over all Lithuania is much easier. All of it, all the country. So since Russians are 900 kilometers away from Lithuania, is only because of Ukrainian bravery. That is how I explain to my NATO friends, but that has not yet sunk in. Previous question, what you asked about Germany, is that there is a change in German policy, and Lithuania will be receiving a German brigade, which is the first time ever after the Cold War where Germany would send its troops and permanently station them in another country. That is a strategic move, and it has to be mentioned.
Oh, wow. And how much they will send?
This is a brigade, so roughly about 5,000 people.
5,000 people, okay. You know, when we have a very black humor here in Ukraine, when nights are coming, you know, it's like a Hunger Games in Ukraine, whether you survive till morning or not. And, you know, you ended your article with a striking phrase: if we continue treating this war in Ukraine like a reality show, the fires in Kyiv may become the season final. What would your real action look like to you in practical terms from European and US leaders?
Well, first of all, the understanding that Putin will not stop has to sink into the policy. Out of the headlines to the policy, what we are going to do when Putin continues. What is our plan? And the only plan is now to support Ukraine as much as we can, not just for Ukraine to survive, but for us to survive. That is the main thing. And if we manage to let that in, kind of to understand this reality, then the next steps are rather clear. Then we stop boasting about the empty things that might happen, might not happen, might happen in 50 days, in 100 days, in 2 weeks, who knows when, but actually giving Ukraine all it needs. And most of the things that Ukraine needs and actually they can actually be produced in Ukraine. That is the main thing. Ukraine has the factories, has the capacity, has the engineers. It lacks, in most cases, money. And we have the money. So let's, like Denmark has done, what is now called the Danish model. It has been replicated by some other countries, but in very tiny amounts. We are able to supply Ukraine with the investment that it needs in order for itself to build up the defenses, because it is also our defenses.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, do you think that Europe is really stepping now into a real long-term strategy after the conference in Rome, Ukraine Recovery Conference in Rome, when they launched the largest equity fund to date for Ukraine's reconstruction, and called on global business to invest even when missiles continue to fall? So, do you think this is a long strategy are becoming real for Ukraine?
Well, look, I will repeat what I said. When I will see European, Ukrainian, American rockets fired by Ukrainians, Russian direction, I will say, okay, this started to give some results. Until then, we might hope. I'm hopeful as much as I can, but I'm not entirely optimistic, and therefore I'm maintaining my critical position. Yeah.
The previous time you were quite critical about coalition of the willing. And not only you, Mr. Landsbergis, not only you, of course, but is something changing from your perspective?
Well, I've mentioned Germany, where a lot of hope, I put a lot of hope into what Germany can actually do. Their ability to invest, to produce, to support its allies is actually enormous. Underdeveloped, not used in a very long time, but Germany is a very powerful country. And if they will be able to overcome the bureaucratic hurdles, political hurdles in the parliament, and actually show their muscle, industrial muscle, I think that this could shift the balance in many cases. Germany is able. So again, it sounds comical, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed for more success.
Yeah, absolutely. While scrolling your social media, I found a video of a former Ukrainian minister, Dmytro Kuleba, where he's saying that he doesn't believe that Trump will end this war. He's only believing that Ukraine will be so strong and independent that will protect itself. Do you think the same?
Yeah, I absolutely share his opinion on this. I've spoken about this number of times, that this is not a theory, this is not a political slogan, that Ukraine is actually a formidable country that has been able to stop Russian attack, defend Kiev, defend most of its territory, but it's slowly it has to slowly retract just because it is not being provided with enough equipment. And it cannot produce everything it needs on its own right now, and we are not giving what Ukraine needs as well. So that is the culprit of the problem. I mean, if that were to change, Ukraine is able clearly to shift the balance of power. Just take historic examples. I mean, Finland was able to stop Stalin in 1940. And Finland is 10 times smaller a country, but it was equipped, for the war. Ukraine is currently not equipped to win this. So I have full faith.
Yeah, Mr. Landsbergis, the next question is, when I see, it's the fourth year of Russian invasion is going on right now, and we're still not getting enough weapon. Do you see any strategic problems that Ukraine are making in all this process? I'm definitely sure it's not about the suit of Ukrainian president.
No, I mean, Ukraine is, as they say, is building a plane while flying it. So many things are very much different now than they have been, let's say 3 years ago. 3 years ago, Ukraine was very much dependent on all the assistance that West could have provided to Ukraine. That was if you get HIMARS, if you get rockets, if you get the systems, then you're able to stop Russians. Now it's very different, right? So a lot has changed. And the country adapted. The country learned how to fight the war. Can things get better? I think that every time they can be better, but it is very difficult to advise the government, not knowing the intricacies of internal struggles. Therefore, I'm more inclined to see what we can do more, what is on our side, and where we can advise. Just one brief note that we did not touch upon that, but it is also very important. There is a European path, a European integration path, where Ukraine has promised to do reforms in many extremely important fields, such as fighting corruption, changing its political culture as well in order to join the EU. And I know that Brussels is not ready in many cases, and I use the opportunities to criticize Brussels, so that they would shape up and do things faster. But one of the things that I would advise Ukraine is not to lose that track. It's incredibly important now, and it will be even more important in the future to rebuild the country, to put it on its feet again after the war is over. And for that, Europe is tremendously required.
Yeah, well, it's a very hard to make, I think, because as you said, Ukraine is building a plane while it's in the plane. So it's super complicated. And, I was so optimistic when the EU ambassador in Ukraine, Maternova, she said that we were already discussing that we will join EU by 2030. But, well, when I hear the messages from Brussels, I'm not that optimistic anymore.
No, you're right. It doesn't seem, so Ukraine is building a plane. I don't think that Europe is building anything.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I've seen the process of how Lithuania joined the EU in 2004. I became a diplomat exactly then, and I started my career in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I've seen how busy not just Lithuanians were, but how busy the Europeans were. We would have so many people coming in, checking the laws. I mean, it was clear that the plane is being built from both sides, from Lithuania and from Brussels. And we'll meet somewhere, the project will be met in the middle. And that's the way it was. Now, when I travel to Brussels, it's a bit more like chirping. You hear you hear that something is happening, but you don't see a lot of action. So then when somebody talks about the dates, 2030, I really wish that that would be a real date. But for that, we should see a lot more action. But that doesn't mean that Ukraine should stop. That is my main point, that Ukraine needs to continue its reforms, not for Brussels' sake, but for its own sake.
Absolutely. That's an amazing point because, I was at the Brussels program last year and I was thinking, okay, we were meeting a lot of people and those who related to Ukraine and those who's working on something on Ukraine. But I was thinking, okay, next year, if they are moving towards the plan to join us by 2030, they should have a lot of departments regarding Ukraine. And I was thinking, okay, they will open the positions and I will apply next year. And then after a year, I'm like, okay, nobody's not opening any positions for us to come to Brussels to work on Ukraine. We know Ukraine, we know what to do, we know what we need. So
yeah. I feel you, absolutely. This is exactly exactly how it should be, and it's not, right? So it is obvious that again we are in this virtual pseudo reality. That somebody has actually said that that Ukraine might be joining, but then is it actually joining? Is somebody actually doing anything about it? So it's professional wrestling in Brussels as well.
Yeah. And, Lithuania has always been one of Ukraine's strongest supporters. What role do you see your country playing now in this, new phase of Russian war? Militarily, diplomatically, economically, are there specific initiatives you're involved in?
Well, it's always best that that the current administration would comment on these things. I only hope that Lithuania would continue its role as a coalition builder. In many cases, our assistance alone, it is important. I believe, we try to do everything that we can when it comes to sanctions and when it comes to sending equipment that we can produce or procure to Ukraine. But the biggest value that a small country like Lithuania can bring is building coalitions to support Ukraine. It could be Baltic, it could be Nordic Baltic, it could be Baltic region, together with Poland and Germany. It could be a wider coalition, but this is the extremely important job that that has to continue. I've tried doing that for during my career as a minister, and now I don't have obviously the tools to do that, but I hope that the current government sees that as a priority and objective.
But every time I see you in Ukraine on somewhere on the conference, you always advocate for Ukraine support. So. Probably not everybody is doing that after they are not on the position. So that's very nice.
I want Ukraine to win.
Yeah.
I want Ukraine to win.
Oh, yeah, we're on the same side. And, finally, I wanted to ask you about this moment of how do you see Ukraine should balance between reconstruction and defense? Why I'm asking, because is there a risk that by focusing too much on rebuilding while bombs are still falling?
Well, it's always a very difficult question. I've advocated almost from the beginning of the war that there has to be a rebuilding process ongoing, just because it gives people hope of normality. That we're not waiting for the time when our country is completely peaceful, everything is done, nothing is happening. If that comes, that will come, right? But we don't know when. And if people can only hope for that to come and have to see all the rubble, all the burning buildings and burned buildings and destroyed buildings, I think people might start losing hope. But if the country shows that we are able to rebuild, we're able to build a school, maybe with help of our foreign, assistance, and Lithuania has been a big part in this, rebuilding schools. And I've always advocated, let's start. I know that some things will be lost again because Russians know how to do that very well. But we know how to build, and we know how to rebuild and reconstruct and show people that actually Ukraine is and will continue to be a wonderful and beautiful country to live in.
you know, what impressed me as a Ukrainian, when Russian bombs are falling to Kharkiv, which is, you know, it's very fast to get there. So sometimes when they bombed at 4 a.m. in the morning, and then 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. already the emergency groups are fixing the road that they were destroyed by Russia. This is amazing. And yeah, that's the hope you're talking about. That's giving us a courage, and, you know, you're impressed by your own people.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that it needs to continue. And I hope that, you know, especially you mentioned the Rome conference, I hope that the commitments will actually materialize and will help, you know, that they will push Ukrainian reconstruction, even in these conditions, further.
Oh, yes, actually, finally. I've heard that Roberta Meloni, oh no, I guess somebody told me that Meloni could be the person who will lead all this reconstruction process of Ukraine. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, you know, it depends on what is the substance of it.
Okay.
I think that most of the reconstruction process will be led by Ukrainians themselves. Maybe the assistance, kind of, you know, the funding, the funding that comes from the West. Yeah, why not? I mean, she's a good political leader, has a lot of respect in Europe and outside Europe. She can do a lot of job for that if that were to happen.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Landsbergis. It's always a pleasure to hear you, to listen to your sharp thoughts. And yeah, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!